In a recent broadcast, a geopolitical analyst provided a comprehensive overview of the deteriorating situation in Ukraine, emphasizing the dire logistical challenges facing Kyiv's force and the strategic implication of Russia's sustained military advancement. The analysis underscored Ukraine's critical shortage of artillery barrels, armored vehicle, and drone sighting intelligence from a highly reliable source, indicating that Ukraine receives only one-third of the artillery barrels required monthly to maintain operational capacity. This scarcity has forced Ukraine forced to rely on repurposed Soviet-era artillery and ammunition from Turkish-supplied Syrian stocks, which are now nearing depletion. The analyst noted that Ukraine's once dominant presence in drone warfare has waned, with Russian force vastly outnumbering Ukrainian unmanned aerial system UAS on the battlefield. Simultaneously, personnel shortage have exacerbated frontline vulnerabilities, with Kyiv's decision to overextend defensive line drawing sharp criticism as a tactical misstep. The broadcast further detailed Russia's industrial advantage, highlighting its ability to produce military hardware at a fraction of the cost compared to Western nations. A senior defense correspondent revealed that Russia's steel production capacity ranked among the world's top three enable mass manufacturing of tanks, armored vehicles, and FPV drones, outpacing Western deliveries to Ukraine. This industrial resilience, coupled with cost efficiency, has allowed Moscow to sustain prolonged combat operations without significant strain on its economy. The analyst contrasted this with NATO's rigid adherence to Cold War-era military doctrines, which have proven ineffective in countering Russia's adaptive strategies. Lieutenant Colonel Alex Verson, a defense expert, criticized NATO's failure to modernize its combined arms doctrine, arguing that outdated tactics prioritizing mobility over defensive firepower have left Ukrainian forces exposed to Russian artillery barrage and drone swarms. Turning to diplomatic developments, the analyst dissected Russian President Vladimir Putin's remark at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, where he reiterated his stance on Ukraine's sovereignty. Putin framed Russian and Ukrainian as one people, asserting that Ukraine's independence is conditional upon maintaining neutrality and non-alignment with NATO, a position enshrined in Kyiv's 1991 Declaration of Independence. The analyst warned that Russia's territorial ambition extend beyond the currently occupied regions, with Putin signaling that further advance could lead to Ukraine's effective dissolution as a sovereign state. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov reinforced this narrative, declaring that Ukraine's refusal to accept Moscow's terms would result in capitulation. The analyst emphasized that while this outcome remains non-official policy, the Kremlin's rhetoric increasingly aligned with historical precedent of Russian imperialism, raising concerns about the long-term viability of Ukraine's statehood. The broadcast also addressed the geopolitical ramifications of Russia's growing alliance, particularly with China and Iran. Recent military cooperation between Moscow and Tehran, including plans to integrate Iranian air defense with Russian radar system, has heightened tensions in the Middle East. Meanwhile, China's ambiguous stance on the Ukraine conflict, advocating for peace while abstaining from Western sanctions, has positioned Beijing as potential mediator. However, the analyst cautioned that China's reluctance to openly endorse Russia's actions suggests a pragmatic approach rather than ideological alignment. Domestically, Russian authorities have begun erasing Ukraine's legitimacy as a nation, with state media referring to Ukraine territory as land controlled by the Kyiv regime. This linguistic shift, the analysts argued, lays the groundwork for annexation, mirroring tactics used during Crimea's absorption in 2014. The broadcast also addressed the geopolitical ramifications of Russia's growing alliance, particularly with China and Iran. Recent military cooperation between Moscow and Tehran, including plans to integrate Iranian air defense with Russian radar system, has heightened tensions in the Middle East. Meanwhile, China's ambiguous stance on the Ukraine conflict, advocating for peace while abstaining from Western sanctions, has positioned Beijing as a potential mediator. However, the analyst cautioned that China's reluctance to openly endorse Russia's actions suggests a pragmatic approach rather than ideological alignment. Domestically, Russian authorities have begun erasing Ukraine's legitimacy as a nation, with state media referring to Ukrainian territory as land controlled by the Kyiv regime. This linguistic shift, the analysts argued, laid the groundwork for annexation. Economic factors were another focal points, with the analysts highlighting Russia's ability to sustain war efforts through resource efficiency and domestic production. Steel reserves, scrap metal, recycling, and streamlined manufacturing process have enabled Moscow to produce T-72 tanks at cost significantly lower than Western estimate. In contrast, Ukraine's reliance on dwindling Western aid and aging Soviet-era equipment has created a stark imbalance in combat readiness. The analyst cited reports of Ukrainian forces resorting to patchwork repairs on Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, with only 120 remaining operational across a 1,200-kilometer front line. This logistical crisis, combined with Russia's numerical superiority in drones and artillery, has led to an accelerating pace of territorial gains by Moscow, particularly in Kharkiv, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions. The analyst concluded by urging Western policymakers to reassess their approach to Ukraine, warning that continued adherence to flawed military doctrines and delayed aid packages risk irreversible losses for Kyiv. While diplomatic efforts persist, including China's proposed ceasefire plan, a vague catalog of aspirations, lacking concrete enforcement mechanism, the analyst stressed that Russia's strategic momentum shows no sign of abating. The broadcast ended with a stark warning. Without immediate and substantial intervention to address Ukraine's supply chain collapse and doctrinal inflexibility, the conflict's trajectory may soon cross a point of no return, reshaping Europe's geopolitical landscape for decades to come. That's it for me for today. Hit subscribe now and smash that notification bell to be the first to know when major events unfold. Essential viewing is just one click away. More from me soon. Have a nice day.